Good evening, everybody. We want to welcome you to part two of our series. We're hoping it's going to be more of a series. And first, I want to thank everyone for those of you who tuned in last week. We wound up with 1,715 attendees, which is, as far as we know, a record in Brookline for any kind of meeting. So, and we have over 850 people this evening so far. So welcome. We've titled this Understanding the Moment, Part 2, a conversation with Jessica Wender-Shubow of the Brookline Educators Union. And we are fortunate again that Meghna Chakrabarty has agreed to moderate. Thank you, Meghna. My name is Lauren Bernard. I am co-president of the Brookline Parents Organization. And very quickly, for those of you who don't know, the Brookline Parents Organization is a town-wide organization. We are a private nonprofit. And we were founded in 2016 by about a dozen parents. And an interesting time when we knew our teachers were unhappy. They didn't have a contract yet. Many of them spoke to us, and we decided we wanted to be more involved in curriculum issues as well as supporting our teachers. And that's the mission that we have never let go of. Our mission is to provide parents with information to participate actively in the formation of curriculum and school policy. And we are committed to excellence in education for all students, creative learning, including increased recess, playtime, outdoor time, transparency and policy making. And the BPO membership is open to all parents and guardians in Brookline, past, present, or future. It is a very inclusive and welcoming organization. And I will turn it over to Ben, who will give you more information about tonight's program. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lauren. Hi, I'm Ben Kelly. I'm the other president of the Brookline Parents Organization. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We're very happy, as Lauren was saying, to have Jessica Wender-Shubow, Bob Miller, Jason Montrose, and Wendy MacMillan who are educators and members of the Brookline Educators Union. So thank you guys for coming, and thanks to Meghna for hosting. This is only the second one of these we've done. Thank you to everybody for sending questions, and we've tried to compile as many questions over email. If we don't get to your question, we apologize in advance. There's a lot of questions. And the same with the Q&A. Feel free to submit any questions tonight on the Q&A. We will do our best to answer, to ask them. And as Lauren said, our goal in these conversations that we started last week is to make sure that everybody can be more informed and find out what's going on in our schools, what's going on with our educators, so that we can all be better informed, but also, how do I put it? The BPO has always been kind of trying to make positive change in our schools, and how can we do that, and how can we have the best information for doing that? And that's all I have to say for tonight. So thank you again, and I will hand it over to Meghna.
Once again, thank you, Ben and Lauren. I'm Meghna, and I am, just for folks who maybe weren't on this webinar last time, I am a Lawrence mom of a 4th grader and an incoming kindergartner. And I didn't make this clear last time, but I should, just to cover all my bases here, that yeah, my professional work is with WBUR, but I am not here in any professional capacity whatsoever. This conversation has no link or endorsement to WBUR, because I'm an extremely conflicted party as a parent in our schools. And so I just wanted to also say that I'm not a member of BPO, but I'm very grateful for Ben and Lauren that they invited me to help moderate these conversations. What I'd like to do actually is just start by allowing all of our panelists today to just give really brief introductions, just a tiny bit about who you are, because one of the things that I've learned over the past year of paying closer attention to our schools is we hear a lot of names and things, but I think this is a great opportunity to actually get to know each other a little better. And I do apologize, I didn't fully do this last week with Suzanne and David, but they got to say a little bit about who they are. So let's start by doing that. So Jess, would you like to just very briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Meghna. My name's Jessica Wender-Shubow, and I'm a daughter of Brookline. I grew up in Brookline, and I went from preschool through high school to the schools, including pre-K over by Heath School in a building that remains in the public domain in Parks and Recreation, Elliott Preschool. I was a part of School Within a School, a sort of democratic experiment in Brookline High School in its early days, when we were really trying to think about what education could be. And that was a really big part of what I took away from the experience as a student in the town. And my dad was a civil servant. He was part of the governing structure in the courts toward the end of his career. So our family was really embedded in the town. And he worked a lot with youth as a district court judge and the schools. So I'm honored to have come back actually to teach social studies at the high school.
Yeah.
And then in the BEU, we have just one person that spends all day on this stuff, and that's me. So I'm on leave from the classroom.
Okay. And just because I'm just a detail obsessive, probably in an unhealthy way. For the purpose of this conversation, you are the president of the BEU.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's my day job.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jess. And Jason. Hi.
Hi. How are you? My name is Jason Montrose. I am a Brookline educator. I work up at the high school as a special ed teacher. I co-teach 2 sections of a wonderful class called Fiction and Film, and I teach 3 sections of Learning Center. Also, I'm the diversity chair for the union and a member of the statewide Alana. I'm a statewide Alana rep also for the MTA. Also a former MECO graduate, but from another school. I won't say which name.
Okay, good. Well, this is the first time I've had the pleasure and honor of meeting you. So hello across Zoom. It's really great to meet you. Mm-hmm. And Wendy, go ahead. You got to unmute yourself, Wendy.
Gets me all the time. My name is Wendy MacMillan. I'm a paraprofessional and have worked in BEEP for the past 19 years. And I'm also the BEU membership chair on our executive board. I live in affordable housing in Brookline, and last year I became an elected town meeting member. My son is a BHS 2015 graduate, and for the 4 years that he was at the high school, I was one of the BHS CPAC co-chairs. Being here tonight is taking me out of my comfort zone. My audience is usually 3 to 5 year olds. But I agreed to be on the panel because I'm deeply committed to Brookline, the educators, the students, and our schools.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, Wendy, I think this is the first time I've had a chance to meet you too, so it's a pleasure. I'm really glad that you decided to step out of your comfort zone. The same skill sets, by the way, that you use socially and emotionally with your 3 to 5 year olds would probably be well applied to Brookline adults right now. So relax, you'll do a great job, I'm sure. And I mean that with the utmost sincerity, because we all have a lot of learning how to get along to do. Bob.
Yeah, hi, thanks Magna, and thanks to the BPO, Lauren and Ben for giving us this opportunity. So my name's Bob Miller. I'm a middle school science teacher at the Heath School. I'm the vice president of the Brookline Educators Union, and even before I was a teacher, my children were students in the Brookline schools, and I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 8 in Brookline.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all again for joining us tonight. I think Bob and Wendy, the two of you might sort of flip in and out of the conversation as per appropriate if there's certain questions that one of you is better positioned to answer than the other. So folks, if you see them sort of flip in and out, that's why. I just wanted to reiterate something that Ben and Lauren said before we fully dive in, and that is, there are more than 800 registrants for this conversation. If the last conversation was any indication, there's no way we're going to get to every question that has already been submitted or that will come in on the Q&A. We've done the best that we can to sort of compile them in a way that you get a real sense of the areas of concern and question and inquiry that the community has had. So we're going to have representative questions from a bunch of different subjects. And I actually want to tell everyone watching, So if we don't get to your question in particular, hopefully we'll get to the area that you talked about. And if not, just keep the questions coming on the Q&A, and we'll do our best. Last time we had more than 400 questions. So just to, Brookline is a curious place. But again, most of these questions come from the community. I've got a couple of follow-ups specifically here and there, and so I'm going to just plug them in if they're my follow-ups as we go along. But let's just dive right in. And I want to start with a better sense as to where we are right now. Okay, so the first question is that the school committee made some very big decisions last Thursday, including zeroing out the cost of living adjustments for every employee in the district in order to deal with this budgetary emergency that we have right now. So Jess, let me just start with you. What is the BEU's view of the decisions that were made last week? Don't forget to unmute yourself.
What happened at Thursday's meeting was a creative stopgap, and it allowed the process to move forward. That's a great thing. We considered the $2.2 million to have been borrowed from the commitment that district makes to the teachers. So we expect that money to be brought back. We know that there's also still remaining a challenge to close the gap, and we know and trust and expect the town will forge ahead so that we don't leave anyone behind. We really need every one of these educators. We think we're going to need more educators in fall, not fewer. And it's very important not to leave the situation where I continue to hear members of the staff getting job offers from other towns, and they are anxious, understandably, and they are looking into them, and that needs to stop even for the remainder of the people. And we're looking for, the actual recall slips to be in hand as fast as possible. We're ready to help with the logistics of that.
Okay, and by the way, for anyone else who wants to jump in, since we're asking folks to be muted until you answer, just wave your hand, okay? There were a lot of questions that came in that people wanted some clarity about how closely, if at all, the BEU worked with the school committee in the past week or two in trying to find solutions to this budget emergency. I mean, how
I
did
know
the
that Bob will help me here, but it's been a difficult process from where we sit because we haven't been able to get information. We're at a disadvantage when we ask for budgetary details. We did not get them. We got only part of what we did get. We got it late, and we then have to scramble. And we are meeting with some of the town leaders as well as the school committee on Tuesday morning at 8. That's something we felt we had to ask for because we have been not getting enough information. We're just going to have to ask directly to the best of our ability. Bob, do you want to add?
Well, actually, before that, let me just ask a quick follow-up here, because this is one of my questions, because I was looking at the school committee calendar I've been watching it very closely, trying to figure out which meetings I could attend via Zoom and not. And what I noticed is that last week there were several meetings of the negotiations subcommittee. There was one that was on.
We weren't invited. No, let me be clear.
There was, well, just so that people know, there was one on June 4th that was scheduled for 4 p.m. and one on June 5th that was scheduled for 8:30 in the morning. And they were on the calendar for a long time until the late afternoon of June 4th when they became canceled. So you say you weren't invited, or did you?
Well, we weren't invited to specific dates, but we did really, as I started in saying, we can't have a conversation without information. We can't, and we have unfortunately gotten very imprecise and shifting information. So it would be hard for us to problem solve. That's really why we press to have people in the room. Bob, do you want to add anything?
I can, about the finances. First of all, this took us by surprise because on Thursday when we met with the town, we'd had no idea how large the amount of cuts were going to be, and we actually had been told that they were going to be not any departments that were going to be cut in their entirety. And, as Jess said, it's been a little bit challenging. On Friday, apparently there was also, I think it was $1.9 million that was reduced from the 6.3 that we were told on Friday morning was the shortfall. I really feel like we as a union and we as teachers are not the financial experts, but the fact that it went from 6.3 to 4.4 million, and then on Thursday it's now 500,000, is kind of disturbing that there were $26 million, as best we can estimate, of layoffs that in the course of 6 days have been disappearing. And it seems like a lot of, I have a colleague who emailed me a day after they got their pink slip saying that they were probably going to lose the mortgage that they were in the middle of applying for because they no longer could guarantee that they had employment. So, the impacts, it's nice to say, we can't imagine a universe where we're not going to bring everybody back, but there are real world consequences that happen in the meantime. And one of them is I have a number of colleagues who have been getting offers from other districts. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I'm going to just go back here for a second, because as a parent, and I know many parents have been emailing me over the past few days, I think people are really confused about the lines of communication between the district, the school committee, and the BEU. And so are you saying right now that for those meetings that were on the calendar, the negotiation subcommittee meetings that were on the calendar, that you weren't invited or that you didn't come? Because it does stretch the imagination a little to think that the school committee just wouldn't invite the BEU in the middle of a total crisis to sit down and talk about, like, what are the possibilities of how we all come together and deal with this?
No, there was dialogue, but we did say that we didn't think it was fair to ask for a wage freeze or other, what unions call givebacks, until we had a clear understanding of what the school committee had done to try to raise the revenue. And we've been having that conversation for a long time.
I think that some of the confusion might be that I think the meetings, if I'm not mistaken, that you're referring to, Magna, were about furloughs, not about the budget for next year. Is that, Jess, is that what's happened here?
I didn't know you were asking. Right. Now, everything was upended. We had to suddenly deal with an emergency situation in the lives of 362 families and a lot of paras. And the furlough issue was raised. And those were complex conversations. So we meet all the time, but nobody was raising next year's budget until we dealt with the emergency. So Bob is on a practical level. That's how it unfolded.
Okay, so we'll come back to communication and collaboration later, because there's a whole mountain of questions from the community about that. But there's still a $500,000 gap, as we know. I'm just wondering, what are the BEU's ideas? Do you have ideas for how to close this gap, or what are your concerns around this remnant $500,000 that we have to deal with?
Bob, do you want to comment? Or I don't have to go first here. Bob is really a town leader, Wendy, town leaders as well.
I mean, again, I couldn't have told them on Thursday when they had a $6.3 million gap how to get that down. But what I do know is that the foundation of the town are the schools, and whether that was to come from reserves, whether it was come from reducing the commitment to OPEBs and other reserves. So other retirement funds are one of the ways that my understanding is, and I think this has been part of what's been going on, but that the town is planning in the upcoming budget for the 2021 year to add to the retirement accounts. And there are a couple of different ones to which they're, I believe, planning to add millions of dollars. That's one avenue. Reserves, any things that are non-student facing, to me, would be the place that you would want to start. And I know Jess is deferring to me for financial questions, but that's not my area of expertise. But I do know enough about the financial situation in the town that to jeopardize the reputation of the schools, even if it's, going to be turned around quickly, to me, it's the reputation. We've been meeting with a lot of different school districts to talk about what's going on right now. And, people are talking about Brookline as, we're the example of what not to do. So, I think it's really important that the town find, at this point, $500,000 is a small amount when you have a $300 and some odd million budget. It's really important to find that. And I would think that there's every reason to believe that the town will support this, whether it's through an override, whether it's through government money that comes in.
Right. So just a couple points of clarification to just be sure we have this correctly. So the 500,000 is in the school, is the gap in the school's budget, right? And so that's correct. The out of the 121 million that was voted on Thursday. And then in addition, OPEBs, just because the language might be unclear, other post-employment benefits, right? Just so that folks fully understand. So there are options out there. I've heard it said already a couple of times, and completely understand. I'm not an expert in budgeting either, but as the labor representatives for the educators of Brookline, are there certain areas, and maybe Bob, you can just clarify a little bit, are there certain areas that the BEU would prefer the school committee and the town to focus on in terms of options that would be amenable to the BEU?
Well, first of all, I would say, we, happy to have, discussions about that, although that's not our responsibility. That's the responsibility of the school committee. I think that, the idea of borrowing some money from funds that aren't going to affect anybody until next year was a good idea. It gives a chance for an override to happen on September 1st or whatever the appropriate date is. But I would say that, there's lots of different ideas that are being, put up on the town meeting listserv on the internet from various different people. And, I've yet to hear some of those being discussed as options for, solving the issue.
I think this is a very, obviously a unique moment in history. We are in the middle of what is a shock. It's a crisis. It is by no means the normal course of affairs. I think as we continue to explore the experience of educators in these last 3 months, we will see what has been uncovered, what we have learned in the process. But the fact remains that this is a time for a community to really rally. I received a call from someone in town who has found people of means who want to step in the stopgap. So we have short-term and longer-term solutions. And I think we've seen some of the short-term ones, and that's great. But we're going to have to really look at what the meaning of a structural deficit is, because we were already hearing, we were, busy negotiating the next contract when this terrible pandemic hit. And we were already hearing that the town, sorry, can't do it, sorry. We were hearing what we call an austerity narrative. So there are longer term issues about the tax rate in Brookline, the need for a residential exemption that would be able to really make that taxation progressive and fair. There are a number of places we'd love to partner with members of the town leadership to bring money in from the federal government right now. In other words, we could spend the whole evening talking about the state level strategies, the HEROES Act. We asked actually the school committee to go in with a public statement to support these efforts. And we still would like to do that because we know that the long term is going to come back and bite us. And while we're doing this emergency.
No, without a doubt. This is a time to actually be able to sort of ride multiple horses at once, if I can use a terrible metaphor, right? One that helps us solve short-term immediate problems, which we have right now, and maybe longer-term structural change. I mean, America and Brookline are long overdue for both. So point well taken. But we've got several questions here about specific groups of educators who might be feeling quite an impact from the circumstances we find ourselves in. So first of all, this is about paraprofessionals. Someone wants to know, what has the BEU heard about paraprofessionals and the June 15th deadline?
Well, I can speak to that. Our understanding is that on June 15th, the paraprofessionals will be getting their pink slips. We don't really have a good sense of how many of our paraprofessionals. We don't know if it will be all of them or some of them. We have been told prior to the Thursday meeting that all of the BEEP paraprofessionals would be laid off. So yeah, June 15th is the day that impending doom is happening in our lives.
I think it's hard to underestimate the level of distress that the floating of a plan that was done verbally with us and mentioned, I believe, in some of the public meetings. Magna, you might be able to help us remember that the entire teacher aide staff would be laid off by the 15th. And so remember, these are people who are making $20,000-ish, 23, 24. Wendy would be able to go into more about what it's like to be in that place. These are people who lost their second and third jobs. And they are being left to have this terror. And then they were told they weren't needed and that they should be furloughed. Now, I understand the argument that there was for some of them, added COVID-19 unemployment benefits by the week. And so I certainly understand the logic, but in terms of feeling of being disregarded, and Wendy, maybe you can say a little bit about what the paras have been up to during these weeks. This was a real blow to morale and self-respect.
I think I might even want to go back a little bit further. We have worked really hard to really improve the contract for the paraprofessionals, because they are the lowest paying paraprofessionals and were for quite a while the lowest paying paraprofessionals in a lot of neighboring towns. So we've been really working hard. We have by far the most diverse staff in Brookline, in the units in our school district, and we have the potential of losing all that we've gained. Like we've been a town that we've had a hard time hiring paraprofessionals. Still even with the progress that we've made, we still have a hard time hiring paraprofessionals. We have a hard time retaining paraprofessionals, and this is just the wrong move on the district's part, because they are losing valuable assets, truly valuable assets to the students in Brookline. So I'm really distressed. I'm really distressed. This is our paraprofessionals have lost their first and second and third jobs. I've had many years where I've had to work 3 jobs to make ends meet, for myself and my son. I'm very incredibly blessed that I have affordable housing in Brookline and I can make that work. A lot of our paraprofessionals can't, and they've already lost their second and third jobs. And this has been their security, and at least until we get to the summer. Now they're hearing that they're not going to have their summer positions. So unemployment benefits don't last long. And we have paras who are have housing insecurities and food insecurities, and they deserved better from the district.
Yeah.
Could I just also add that
Just briefly, but go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. The paras that I work with and that I think all across the district are probably have the closest relationship with the students who have the greatest need. I mean, the people who that the students want to connect with are the paraprofessionals. And I know that also the special education department are panicked about the idea that students need the paraprofessionals there in order for the students to be able to really, you know, fully engage in school.
Right. And just to add a sort of a small anecdote to the uncertainty and challenges that Brookline paraprofessionals have already faced. This is a true story. After a school committee meeting back in January, was it January? I think it was January. It was held at the high school because it was at the same time as town meeting. And I attended the school committee meeting and it was too cold for me to walk home. I wimped out. So I called an Uber, and the Uber driver was an extremely lovely man who had been a Brookline paraprofessional up until last year at the high school, in fact. Because he said, hey, were you just in that building? And I was like, yeah. And he said, I used to work there. So I asked him about it. And he said he had to leave because he couldn't put food on the table. And he went to work in a charter school in the city of Boston. So it's, your point is well taken about the vulnerabilities that these essential workers in our district are facing. Now, there are lots of other questions about educators of color as well, because as I think many people have been learning, if they didn't already know, that the district has tried, or that Brookline has tried to correct long overdue lack of diversity in the ranks of our educators. And because so many of our educators of color are relatively new and perhaps don't have the same protections as more senior level educators, we've got lots of questions about that. So if I could just ask a couple of them, like, first of all, someone just wants to know, how do we protect the jobs of educators of color or even educators with disabilities right now, given the crisis that we're in?
In terms of protecting jobs of educations of color, I mean, we just have to close that financial gap. And if we're talking about all the things that are going on in the world, and we're talking about Black Lives Are Mattering, things like that, then we're just going to have to close that financial gap. Now, I'm not a financial person, so I'm not sure what's the best way of going about that, but I'm sure the wonderful, bright people of Brookline could figure that one out.
Well, so, I mean, we've actually got a really interesting question about that, given the place that paras and educators of color find themselves in. This is a question actually from an educator. They say that unemployment rates have neared 20% in Brookline and over 30% in some parts of the state. Many workers in all sectors have been asked to make sacrifices, including pay cuts and reduced hours. Essential workers, some of them who earn minimum wage, are literally having to risk their lives every day to go to work. So given that, is it so unreasonable to expect teachers, especially those at higher steps on the pay scale, some of whom make six-figure salaries, to share some of the burden by giving up a pay raise for 1 year? And the person goes on and says, in the event that the school committee is unable to come up with enough funds to cover fully reinstating all positions, would the union prioritize securing pay increases for the remaining educators, or bringing back all staff and thereby possibly reducing or foregoing a pay raise for some members?
Oh, there's a lot of, that's a big question. But where I come from is that if we're cutting from people that are on the top of the pay scale, and some of those people on the top of the pay scale might be educators of color, so now we're cutting from them. Or we're foregoing raises, so now we're not giving educators of color raises. So now that's just pushing us back, and that's almost giving us crumbs. We're getting crumbs, and we don't want crumbs. We want to have the same equity as everybody else and the same rights as everybody else, and the opportunity to make that type of money. And so it's not all about money, but it's all about doing what's best for our kids and for the students of Brookline. And there is a financial cost to that, unfortunately.
So the idea of asking the essential workers to be essential workers and to take a pay cut sounds hard to swallow in a wealthy community, because we think there are creative ways and responsible ways. You know, this, when I mentioned that the situation has stripped bare some of the hidden experiences that have been here all along, we start to see our educators as whole human beings with families and with responsibilities for small children. You know, when we left the buildings, we were already making the case that educators' caseloads, that our special education caseloads were too high, that educators were not able to take care of their families when they finished their workload, that already for a set of years, the priorities in the budgets were making it hard to sustain jobs as educators. So what happened here is the teachers were tremendously ready to jump on board, had to change a school system on the fly. And even if we hadn't had this shocking treatment with these sledgehammer layoffs that were unnecessary, we still would have had a problem of asking the working people in the town, and I'll say something about the amount of money, right? But the pay. But we asked the working people in the town to take the full shock. And the truth is that economic insecurity is creeping up into the middle class. And so we have, among educators, I think many know, the educators know, one of the most expensive schooling requirements for licensure for the lowest pay. And so the discussions that are happening about student debt, we have educators who are going into their well into the years on that salary scale in staggering debt because of the dysfunction of our education system, higher education funding. So we have a large crisis. We saw a political election that began to challenge the price and the debt. So on the one hand, we have a revenue problem, and then we have a debt problem.
Yeah.
And our working people are on the edge, even if it looks like they are making a lot of money.
Point well taken. Point well taken. In the context of this conversation, though, and you're going to have to forgive me in advance, I'm going to come back over and over again, to what can we do here in Brookline. And so just to put a finer point on the question that I just raised from the educator who submitted it, would the BEU be even open to the idea that perhaps some of the higher or highest paying members of the union take a pay freeze or a pay cut in order to preserve the jobs or income of lower paying members?
There is way too much influx right now to start asking educators who are in the midst of teaching their students, who have just gone through the trauma of this mismanagement and dysfunction in we call it the fifth floor, to ask them to continue to meet with students, to prepare and do the hard work, which I hope we'll talk about, of conceiving of how schools will look, to offer their expertise on this, and then ask them, by the way, we want to increase your economic insecurity and ask you to do still more when we have not exhausted other opportunities. And we haven't seen them.
The other thing that, Magna, I just wanted to point out is that, first of all, the town has to look for how to keep the schools intact and whole, because there's every likelihood that come September, we might need more, not less educators. We already know that there are districts that are offering our educators jobs. I talked to one who had already 4 job interviews lined up. So, the question isn't, well, would we do that? The question, really, we're not there yet. Yes, we can start to really do some sacrificial things that are going to hurt the public schools of Brookline in the long term for the next decade or two. But first, we have to see if we can do that, do what we need to do without touching that. And plus, the people who are going to then be asked to come back are going to be asked to come back to lower salaries when we're in a competitive market and every school district's looking for people. So, you know, it seems like it's a really premature question, especially when you're given the fact that we just all of a sudden came up with almost $6 million.
Right.
I mean,
And
if we had done that a week ago, we would have just taken $6 million worth of cuts for no reason.
yeah. We actually did receive several questions of people who wanted to understand why certain decisions were able to be made after the announcement of the initial $6 million deficit and couldn't be made before. Those were better directed towards the school committee. So we're forwarding those questions to them. I do want to make one last point, and we don't have to dwell on it too much because there's so many other issues to get to. But we should also note, and I read Dr. Sharon Abramowitz's open letter that she put out on Facebook and through email to the whole community, the school committee member, with great interest. Sharon's got a lot of experience in international response to disease outbreaks. I think right now she's working on the International COVID Response Coordination with UNICEF. So when she talks about preparedness, I tend to listen. And in her letter, she noted that what we're talking about regarding the budget right now does not account at all for COVID-related expenses that we will have to incur and we must incur in order to keep teachers, to educators, staff, and kids safe when they go back to school, whatever school looks like. That could potentially be millions more dollars that we have to come up with. So again, we could spend
one last thought on that, okay? If I may, and that is, when I say this is an extraordinary moment, it's also an opportunity for the town to show what it can be as an example in the Commonwealth. And that is, I received a call that there are some people who want to contribute money to the schools right now who could, some of whom, you know, we have people who have been tremendously generous with their philanthropy. And philanthropy is not the way to run a school district. But these folks have a tremendous number. There's no reason they cannot be stepping forward to help they are experts on finances. They can volunteer to talk about the creative means of getting through the crisis, as opposed to laying silent and let just the public employees be the go-to folks. So I hope they will step forward and go that extra mile. And also, I think that if we are talking about, I often hear about the Moody's rating, the AAA rating and things, but you know, I'm a history teacher, and I think these folks know who to call and how to come up with creative stopgap approaches that won't hurt the Moody's rating. And if there were ever a time to do it, this is it. You know, we have an organization in Boston called Responsible Wealth. It's people with great inheritance, multimillionaires, they're billionaires. They are dedicating their time to closing the inequities. We're going to hope we talk about our staff of color. Our working class is largely of color. So when we talk about our commitment to racial justice, we are talking about enabling people of color in our community to survive.
So there's also Mary
Actually,
Ellen.
Bob, I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna have a heavy hand here as a moderator. I did really want to move on, but I just can't, because this is generating a lot of conversation in the live Q&A. So I just want to reflect a little bit about what some people are saying. So first of all, it looks like a comment has come in. Many of us educators are ready to make a compromise for the sake of retaining our jobs and feel like the BEU is not supporting this action. I don't know who said that, but it's an educator.
Well, I'd like to comment on that. I think that when you have a conversation in town and in the country that treats budgets like they are forces of nature, like they are sort of like the weather, then there's a time for more imagination. And so our job in the union is to have the interests of our members in mind. We do that with a good deal of knowledge. We do that through a democratic process. We don't, I understand that the dominant discourse in this society is that the working people of this country should take all the hits and the structural arrangement should remain the same. But that's not working. It's not working for the economy. It's just not working anymore. So we have our own ways and very effective ways to talk with our membership, and we'll continue to do that. I think what Bob was saying, and you might want to elaborate, is it is way too soon. There's $3 trillion on the table right now in the federal debate, legislative debate. And there is tremendous amount. I mean, if we could spend the rest of the evening talking about some of the discussions happening at the state level. So, you know, there are all kinds of progressive tax plans. There are capital gains options. If you knew about Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax, there are versions of that at the state level. So,
I mean, any additional, I hear what you're saying. And I definitely, I hope you trust me when I say I've covered every single one of the issues that you just mentioned. And we could talk, and maybe when we can get together again, Jessica, we can share a beer about the challenges of instituting any changes or any tax reform in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This is the wonderful state whose voters rolled back tax reform, and even came to the gas tax and pegging that to inflation. So I won't bore people with those details, but this is a crisis that has hit everybody. And yes, you are exactly right. It has hit some disproportionately hard in terms of the economy, their economic and even physical well-being. We have comments coming in here. Someone wants to know, am I understanding correctly that the BEU expects the town to pass an override in this very environment of 25 to 30% unemployment across all areas? Or are they willing to share the financial crisis being experienced by everyone?
I would be happy to take a stab at that. First of all, you know, there's nothing wrong with the question, but the problem is that, first of all, you asked about COVID-related expenses, and it's my understanding from Mary Ellen Norman, who's the Vice Superintendent for Finance for the schools, that we are getting reimbursed for all of those currently. So, you know, that's really not the issue. And I would say that, you know, there are people who are making more money now. Some of the frontline workers are being paid. My son works in the restaurant business. Some of them are being paid time and a half or double time. You know, so it's not that everybody is suffering right now. Some people are doing better. Some people are doing worse. I don't think anybody's heard teachers complaining that, you know, we're you know, that we have jobs right now. But, you know, I think that to say that we should take cuts when we don't need to take cuts is the problem that I have. And, you know, we're not, you know, it does not look like we're in that situation. So, you know, I guess I'm confused about why is the question about taking pay cuts at this moment.
Well, I can't speak for the people who are in the Q&A, but in terms of conversations that I've heard and have had, I think there is a sense, perhaps if not cuts, then other options, because except for, I mean, just to your point, except for the best off amongst us, this is happening everywhere. I think I mentioned it last time, and if I didn't, for example, I'm a staff member at Boston University, and Boston University unilaterally decided not to do any contributions to any employees' retirement funds. That's more than 10,000 employees at Boston University. And for me, it happens to be a huge benefit that's been zeroed out. But you know what? I still have my job, for which I am honestly utterly grateful for. So that's just, I think that's why people are wondering.
Well, I think it's a community discussion. I think we're not done with the discussion. I mean, remember that, I think, again, as I mentioned, the level of the upended lives that were the result of these layoffs has occupied, I am sure, the members of the school department as they tried to figure out the complexity of managing 362 individual locations, you know, in the sort of seniority situation, to now figure out how to reverse it and how many and who. This has really stalled the important work of moving forward on figuring out next year. And we've been doing, that's what the teachers are doing. And frankly, the BEU has been fielding the calls, the distress calls. And so I think that the question is fine. The answer is premature. The resolution's premature.
Everyone's going to get mad at me for moving on, but I really want to, because there are lots of other really important questions that all of your input will be extremely helpful and deeply valued. So I cannot tell you how many questions we got about sort of what school is going to look like, and the experience that families and educators have had over the past 3 months regarding remote learning. So first of all, about what school is going to look like, bear with me for a moment, but I just want to read this comment and then a question from a member of our community. This person says, we are all in this together, and we really need our teachers' experience on panels and committees that the school committee is putting together regarding remote learning. The teachers know our kids and their needs at different ages. They know how to teach and have begun to teach remotely. And if we do go back to in-person school, they know our buildings, the traffic flows of students and teachers, how classrooms in particular might be needed to be set up. Their input is critical in making safety decisions and learning decisions to keep teachers and children safe. So we have at least a dozen or half a dozen questions about why the BEU has declined to offer at least 3 educators to sit on the panel, on the remote learning panel that the school committee has assembled.
I think I can help with that one real quick. Okay, it's highly unorthodox for a school committee member or group of them to micromanage the schools. They do the vision, they do the budget, and they do the collective bargaining. But we have 1,200 members. We have, and even right here, Bob and Jason alone could show you the breadth of complexity of what it takes to actually deliver services to students, and different students in different groups of students. And so we have been working inside the process that is the most productive and constructive way to make the plan. And that is, we work with curriculum coordinators and on teams, and we work with the 5th floor. So let me say why the task force was not the best use of the union's expertise, the membership's expertise. Number one, 3 teachers standing in for 1,200 is not going to get you the complex and the important information that you need. So what we were asked is to put 3 token teachers onto a committee.
Let me just, but you said earlier though that you have really good communication systems to understand the needs and wants and aims of your membership. So why wouldn't that communication be able to work so that those 3 could accurately represent that?
Right, because what they can't do on a task force committee that is of non-educators is to actually get at the relationship between the resources and the vision. So let me give you an image of why it was appropriate for us to be working with Nicole Gittens. And I appreciated that she acknowledged that she did not get back to us, that she did not actually get this process going, you know, that our emails were lost in her pile. But first time I ever had a conversation, a good, you know, substantive conversation with Nicole Gittens, which was great. I talked about the 3 components that a union is aware of when it comes to contributing to making schools better. And I called it head, heart, and hands. There are a lot of important visions and ideas in the head. There's a lot of commitment and passion. That's where the school committee is, you know, unquestionably deeply committed, and we honor their service for this. But what teachers know that they can't know, but curriculum coordinators and do know, for example, the administrators that are in the building working closely, and then the fifth floor, is whether it's realistic, whether the vision and the passion behind it is working on the ground. And so the task force is an exercise in the imagination. But the work that we are doing is the concrete work of getting the resources behind the vision. What we're taking instead as a route is a joint labor management committee that will feed into the collective bargaining process for the next memo of understanding or contract. And the reason that it matters is that contracts are about the priorities and the commitments of resources that are made to support a vision. And we have a responsibility to carry out that process and come to an agreement that is a transparent, comprehensive, interlocking picture. So three individuals, it's actually not an efficient way for us to solve the problems, to sit on that task force. What we need to do is get another contract. And that contract will reflect the actual concrete daily schedule. So to be really concrete, the work goes, it looks at the health and safety issues, which we expect will be informed by Sharon's insight for sure, the teaching itself, and the routines, workload, the school schedule.
So
now,
can
really,
I just jump in here?
the school committee doesn't really want to plan that stuff, do they?
Well, so I'm approaching this in terms of my understanding as a parent, and to be perfectly frank, I'm a little perplexed, because help correct my misunderstanding here, because it seems like what we need now is in fact more imagination to find a way to come through this crisis as a unified community. And I just don't understand why in an attempt to assemble an expert panel from our community about what school needs to look like for the well-being of everyone involved,
The problem
we don't have educators who are the heart of that sitting on that panel.
No, the problem is not with the educators. They are working hard, and I'd be happy to talk about the latest work on how this is unfolding.
It just seems it seems less efficient to not have them on the panel than more efficient, as you seem to be describing.
The problem is the experts are not educators on the task force. They are
that's why we need educators on the panel.
No, but they can have they are parents or members of the community, and that's really great. They are the people who can share what they hope from their schools. But the mechanics of making it work have to be done by educators. And
exactly. But isn't this exactly why, like, say in this group of parents,
I'm going to turn
if I just may, and they come up with ideas, isn't the best thing and the fastest thing for expert educators who would be sitting on the panel if the BEU allowed them to say, well, that idea is probably not going to work, and here's why.
Can only know.
To have it quickly.
They cannot know the big picture. They can only know their silo. And in other words, we are already linking the various roles. So when we meet and we have working groups, and then we filter that into a joint labor management process, we have Jason represented, Wendy represented, and Bob represented. And they have already vetted the interplay between those roles. We do it in an ongoing and active way. And what we've been able to do is connect the dots. Now, the idea of sending it has to be an ongoing process. 3 teachers sitting on the task force cannot possibly keep track of the complexity of those various roles.
With all due respect, though, you have a small group of people negotiating a contract for the entire union. So you rely on a subset of people to represent the interests of.
Well, I think we should talk more about how bargaining works. No, I think that's an oversimplification. So let's reserve that. Bob, I don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, I think that Magna, I think it's sort of flipped around. I think that what's happened is that we've been trying to work with Ben Lummis and Nicole Gittins and Casey No Miller and the people who are educators, professional educators, And I feel like what the task force should have been doing was finding this $6.3 million while we were working with the fifth floor to come up with the proper teaching issues. So, you know, just like it's not my job to worry about where they're going to get their $6.3 million, I don't think it's the school committee's job to be telling us what the kids need. I mean, we want to focus on the children, and I think that's really what it boils down to.
Right.
I want to ask Jason, I would like to ask
I was
Jason,
actually just going to turn to him, but go ahead.
how it feels for him to, if you want to sit down, Jason, with a Harvard Business School professor who has never taught, has never worked in a school, and try to figure out with him how you should teach.
Yeah, I don't think that'll work because just my expertise, and I'm not working in the business world and trying to tell him what to do. And in the special ed world, it would be difficult for him to come in and tell me exactly what to do without having that life experience. Like our department heads, our Unit B folks, they're all experienced educators. So when they come into the classroom and they come in to correct us and help us out, we understand where they're coming from because they've had that life experience that they can draw from.
So I guess there's something I'm missing, because it would seem to me that this is exactly why we need teachers or educators on the remote learning task force so that they can do exactly what you just said, Jason, to teach the other members of the task force what the realities are, what the specific needs are. I don't know. There's something I'm not understanding why keeping groups apart is actually going to be better for Brookline than bringing folks together.
So the issue here is not about whether or not we can have a conversation with the volunteers on the task force. We can, but we can't afford to do anything but work in the trenches right now with the people who understand what the resources are and are not, that in detail, so that we can solve this plan. It's really about the triage. And that is, we have a way to filter in the insights of hundreds of teachers into a team process, not 3 teachers going and reporting it and having to explain it and having to do it, translate it into the language of people who wouldn't have any reason to know anything about what real teaching and learning looks like. So what we're doing is working educator to educator. And then we will meet and ask for the resources and explore and do the collective bargaining. Let's talk about the collective bargaining. I know it's coming up. It was our idea to have open bargaining. The reason that we want the community to watch is so that they can learn how the sausage is made and they can really appreciate it. There's no translation. You don't have to send 3 people in to tell people what went happen over there. We can watch this in real time and see how it is that the working groups that are happening inside the BEU get together with the administrators in town hall, and then ultimately meet across the table in a completely open forum. And so the task force, I would recommend that the task force members, that we get going on this, and that the task force members sit in the room and learn in real time from a whole slew of educators. Now we don't just have a small group that go behind a small back door and negotiate, to, you know, as you were saying. We have an extremely open process inside the union. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't act in one voice. That's what collective means, you know, collective voice. But we have been able to gather, and I want to say why we don't send individuals in by themselves to represent 1,200 people.
I'll let you do that very briefly because there's 2 other really big areas of conversation that I want to get to, and we only have about 25 minutes.
I just want to say how exciting this process is. And that is, we have 3 working groups that relate. When we have meetings, we have hundreds of teachers funneling into our working groups. Those working groups are going to sit on this committee. This committee is going to work with the central administration. We're going to see if we can come to a plan that would be a good working proposal. And then we're going to ask the school committee, what do you think of it? So there will be a conversation. And because we are committed to open bargaining, all the task force people can come.
Okay. Well, you know, one of the double-edged sword of having brave and open conversations like this is that any one of the topics we dive into, we could talk for hours on end about each of them. So again, everyone out there, please forgive me for moving on. And I just want to take this moment to also reiterate my appreciation to all of you, Jess, Wendy, Bob, and Jason, for engaging with these questions that are coming forth from obviously the community and me. So we do need to talk about what school might look like in the fall, because we've got a mountain of people who have expressed a variety of experiences with remote learning thus far over the past 3 months. I was going to read a couple of stories that were sent to us. I don't really have time to do that, but I'll just read one of them. Our 12-year-old went from A and B grades to failing grades this past month, and this child would never skip school before, went from that to frequently choosing not to stay in the online classes. Since we ourselves were working full-time from home, we could not watch every single class. He's not the only child who fell in between the cracks in the at-home distance learning model. Other parents saying there has been also unjustifiably wide variation across schools within Brookline regarding remote learning, and many questions, folks needing clarification. Is it true that the current memorandum of understanding does not actually require any live teaching while schools are closed?
Yes.
It is true.
That's correct. Now, I really think we should be sure to hear what Jason and Bob can tell us about the range of experience, the complexity, not just their own individual. What the memorandum of agreement said was that we are in a pandemic and that we do not necessarily know what individual educators will find themselves facing. And therefore, we must accommodate, we must be honest that to demand a certain kind of consistency would be to lie about the realities of different experience. And that is different home situations, different responsibilities, different health issues. And so the memorandum of agreement is simply realistic. And it says you cannot run schools during a pandemic like a factory, because these are human beings coping with very, very varied experience. That's what it says, is that we don't know if every educator will be able to run a routine normal schedule, that is locked into being in a certain place at a certain time. And we also don't know if every educator thinks that the synchronous learning is the best way to accommodate the needs of their students, especially those with very intensive needs and unique needs, our special needs kids.
And I could just talk even just from a gen ed special ed perspective with co-teaching and just from flat out special ed perspective, but in terms of co-teaching in class, I was able to co-teach a group of seniors this year, and the pandemic was hard for them, and they had a hard time adjusting to online learning. So the things that were effective, that we've had some Zoom classes together, but the most effective way in order to help students was one-on-one Zoom classes or one-on-one Zoom meetings with students in order to really help them access the curriculum. So that's been very time consuming. I know there was a mandate that teachers only work 20 hours a week, but I think teachers probably might be working more than 20 hours a week right now. And in terms of special ed education, we still have to have special ed meetings that still happen. We still have to have learning center meeting times. And then sometimes some students don't show up. So many educators have to be creative in terms of reaching out. That might be emailing the parents. I mean, I know some teachers will straight up just call kids, I know. I mean, I was driving today and I had to call a kid and I said, hey, I got an email from your science teacher. We got to figure this out. Let's plan a time to meet on Monday. So that's like the type of things that we're doing consistently. And we try to get right on top of kids and put out fires as soon as we can. And I'm not the only one. So that's just a story that I told you what I did today to reach out to students so I can help her so she does not fail her science class.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify
Did I take
so
a
there's
crack at
no
this?
question about the
Well,
20-hour
let's
thing?
spot you. You mentioned Bob, and I
I just
I
wanted
forgot
to
about you, Bob. So
clarify
go ahead, take
the
a crack at it.
20-hour thing.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to say that actually I know teachers that are working 60 hours a week, and most teachers that I have talked to are spending more time, not less time, since we closed the buildings. But what I would say about, video, no video, different kids have different needs. And that's one of the things that teachers are really good at, is trying to adapt for each student. And the other piece of this is that, it's very much a person-to-person profession. Different teachers have different skill sets. So there are some teachers that are doing amazing things with various different online tools. I just saw something that was static that was done by an art teacher at Heath, where the kids are posting these art things on a bulletin board, that it's not like live teaching, but the artwork is just amazing, and they're talking to each other about what they're getting from their artwork. So there's, I would just say that, it's different kids have different needs, different teachers have different skills, and I think parents are sort of hyper-focused on right now because they have so much time, and they're like comparing, oh, what's your kid? Oh, my kid's not doing, they're seeing things that normally they wouldn't see the differences.
So Bob, I think it's going to be okay for me to say that most parents listening or watching this do not have time. That's not what's raised their concerns. Nobody has enough time to work, to maintain their health, teachers included, and do school, look after everyone. It's not that we have time. It's that, yes, everyone's in the same space together. So it has raised,
no, you're right. It's not time.
It has raised, and people talk to each other because we're a community. No one's having conversations in the mode of unnecessary complaint. I think people are just confused about why there has been such a wide variety of experiences in remote learning so far. And I do want to just ask something specific about sort of what the BEU's take has been so far, and then use that as a transition to keep talking about the future, because I really, really, really want to know about where do we go from here. But in terms of if the BEU has placed any restriction on, this is from a question, restriction on teachers and the interactions they can have with their students. I do have here a communication from mid-May, roughly May 13th, that was sent out by the BEU to members that says the BEU is calling on you being educators, to refrain from doing the following tasks until further notice. Starting immediately, please do not schedule any of the formal spring parent-teacher conferences. Do not work on student progress reports. Do not agree to enter any school building to do anything but retrieve some belongings of your own if you wish. Do not supply any evidence for your educator evaluation. Do not make a video for incoming kindergartners. Do not take on any other newly added task. What is unreasonable about doing parent-teacher conferences? What is unreasonable about making a video for 5-year-olds?
No. I think that the context matters, Magna. So that message is a way to stop the confusion and the difficulty of understanding how students would get attention they needed. It was just a very specific week where we were trying to get clarity from the administration, because in each of those topics, there was utter contradictory information arriving in the buildings from our administration. And we found that the educators were paralyzed by the confusion. They were getting contradictory information, and we could not get a clear answer. And we asked everybody, and sometimes the only thing you can do is say, let's take a stop for a second until we can get this cleared up. And so unfortunately, when some of our friends in the community try to publicize internal conversations, they have no context. And so this is a nice example. Now, I could talk about all the specifics because I've had the benefit of sitting with teams of educators, special educators, meeting with Casey, as Bob was saying, communication, with a group, talking to Nicole, and some of these things are still confused. And so there has been deep ethical commitments of our teachers to fairness. And I want to say about the 20-hour piece that Jason was talking about. It was the Department of Education that was sensitive to making sure that our special ed students would get the accommodations to which they are entitled, and that teachers are tirelessly working, right? And it came back to me anecdotally that some people thought somehow the union was saying that some children should be denied the space to achieve in order to achieve equity. And now that's a philosophical position about education. And that is, and it's already been going on in Brookline about whether or not there ought to be a pitch to the kids that need more. We have made an ethical, moral commitment to the students who are struggling most. And as Jason was alluding to, sometimes it's the kid you didn't expect. The one who does great in the building, suddenly floundering. The one who was the most difficult in his or her effort, routinely suddenly thriving. All of these adjustments getting made. But the Department of Education knew that all of those meetings that Jason has referenced, where you have general ed teachers in communication with special ed teachers, that those are human, deep, complex conversations that have to happen. And that on the one hand, you could not, for every kid that wants to forge ahead as if this were normal school when it isn't, this was leaving these kids behind. And the other thing is the level of exhaustion and stress on the students. And that is remote learning, it turns out. I mean, we're learning this as we go. Screen time is extremely exhausting. It can even be alienating for some, even though it's pleasant for others. So we are trying to be very attentive to the emotional and mental health of students, as well as the fairness question. And unfortunately, when you look on the outside and you want a standardized picture, and I don't think most parents do, I think they understand it. And Bob mentioned, if parents were in the schools, they would see all students are not living the same education.
Right. So I'm running out of time, and Ben and Lauren are telling me to move on. But I do want to just add one little thing to that, and that is that, and I'm only going to, this is a question from me, I'm going to speak for myself. The thing that that our family has struggled with the most isn't so much the evolution of how remote teaching has been going, because this is a world that none of us have been in. So no one expects perfection, let alone me from the start. I don't even know what perfection looks like in this context, right? But I miss our teacher, okay? I miss her expertise. My daughter misses the connection with her. That special magic that only happens when her teacher is the one doing the teaching. So when we talk about, and this is because we get maybe a maximum of like half an hour twice a week of face-to-face time with her teacher. I think that's a pretty common number. So when we talk about what school is going to look like in September, what I think a lot of people want to know, what I want to know is, what's the BEU's vision for that? What's your imagination for how we can bring together, not just through screens, remote doesn't have to be just through screens, but bring together teachers and students so that we can get back to that place where actual teaching and learning is happening?
Yeah, I don't want to dominate here, but it's going to be a lot tougher because these kids knew their teachers. And the next bunch aren't going to have formed that community during the first 2/3-ish of the year. It's going to be much, much different. It's going to be harder even. I mean, even though we don't know exactly whether community will be able to be built. But we found ourselves going back to the original platform, which we frankly still think stands. And that is the primary priority has got to be teaching the whole child, allowing children to be uniquely themselves and allowing educators to find their way to those kids. And so the most deadly threat right now is standardization, test-driven standardization. So we have heard some scary things mentioned in school committee meetings that I think I can confidently say go against at least the majority. I mean, we're 1,200 members. We're not like in lockstep here. But I think that we can trust that the idea of having standardized lessons, canned lessons sent out to modules to all the students would be a serious degradation of the quality of Brookline education.
But more live teaching doesn't have to be standardized.
Well, one of the reasons, to Jason's point about all the hidden stuff that goes behind the scenes, we have said all along, we said it from the beginning, we're saying it now, you need more educators, not fewer, to be able to maintain human connection. And that's what people came to the profession to have. I don't know, like, right, Jason? I don't know, why'd you be on?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll tell you, I was a special ed student back in the day and I struggled and I figured it out and I figured out that was the best way I can make a difference. But a lot of those one-on-one Zoom meeting times, they're more than just teaching. It's just connecting with the kid. And like a kid, sometimes as educators, kids might experience something at home or something in the community and they just need a vent. So even a lot of those sessions, sometimes the people are just venting about their feelings, like what's going on in the world right now. Kids are really torn up about it. So part of that sometimes is just allowing them to vent and helping them process that stuff. And then we get to the education and teaching part. So I think that therapeutic piece that all educators do, I think that's what's really missing with kids. And so if I have, say, 22 kids in 4 sections of a class, it's going to be hard for me to really reach kids one-on-one, because although we do have those group class meetings, it's those individual times where kids can really feel comfortable with talking just one-on-one and being able to express their feelings.
Totally agree. Couldn't agree more. The question is, how do we do that, right?
We have a lot of work to do.
Whatever the model is going to be in September, right?
The problem so far, I mean, what happened is we got a lot of time wasted, and it is a tragedy, and we're not happy about it. And that is by disrupting the staff in this way and threatening to diminish the size of the staff. We had all the imaginative works had to stop. All of a sudden they're saying, we don't need, the things that were said in school committee meetings were shocking. We don't need our teachers because they can't do this. Oversimplification. This is a process that we are trying to institute. And frankly, we should be talking with one another, not with, people that don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and I could say just even from a lot of the teachers that I spoke to, like people's heart were broken, and it was just kind of hard for them to move on past that. And these are educators that have been in a district for a long time. If you're a health and wellness teacher, if you're a fine arts teacher and you've been teaching a district for 27 years, or you're a language teacher, and to find out a district that you love and you love the kids, and now that it was almost like you were in a bad relationship, or not a bad relationship, but a relationship that just went bad and you got dumped. And so that pain and hurt, that mental anguish was tough for teachers to wrap their head around. And so there's a lot of social emotional pain with that on top of the other things that are going on.
So this brings me to the last question or questions. I'm going to run out of time. Jason, I think you put it perfectly. And I would say that the anguish extends beyond educators. And the anguish has been there in this community for some time. And I'm just going to reflect my observations from paying much closer attention than I had before over the past year. and going to school committee meetings, etc., for 12 months. It seems to me, and I think I know people care about this because we received a slew of questions about this. There is tension, animosity, anxiety, enmity between, it seems, the BEU, the school committee, administration. I don't know how long it's been going on for. It's clearly been going on for, but just a second. I just want to add, I'm building to a question here. If you're witnessing me get a little emotional, it's because I feel emotional about this. We cannot solve the problems of this district until the 3 groups of educational leaders in Brookline are able to talk to each other and come together in good faith and help reduce the uncertainty, help reduce the anxiety. So what is it going to take? What can the BEU do to help bring people together?
I appreciate the question. I want to leave people with how optimistic and excited we are about the incoming school committee and the incoming interim superintendent. Because, and why we went to open bargaining as our proposal from the start was because we thought it would help move things forward. For 5 years, really, and it's true, and I think you're on it, Meghna, we have tried to solve the problems of these schools as partners with the school committee and the central administration. And we have talked a lot. We've talked for hours and hours and hours. And the response again and again and again was management prerogative, no. And so we have, and they are public documents, we have an entire platform of what we think the schools need. We have an entire set of proposals that are public record as far as we're concerned. And we believe we want to come to the middle and find those compromises. That's what bargaining is about. And we have faced in the bargaining team of this school committee, and I don't know how they work when they're in private. We only know the people we've heard from. A business model of top-down control that has said, here's a suggestion box. We'll do it if we feel like it, but we will not work with you because we are philosophically against partnering with unions. And I'll stop there because if that changes, we can forge ahead to solve these problems.
So I've heard it said a couple of times tonight that the best vehicle in which to bring the community together is through the bargaining process. But I think a lot of people want to know, does it have to be limited to that? There's a question here. How do we start having more conversations about children together? How can we help turn things around so that we're all working at least with a better understanding of each other going forward?
Yes.
Can that be done outside the bargaining process?
No,
and
no, what happens is there's a feeder process. And yes, of course we should have conversations. Not sort of spreadsheets that try to put teachers under surveillance to make sure they're working enough, not some of the wacky ideas that have come out. We want this bargaining process underway. We have the joint labor management is the more freewheeling way that you really get to kind of come up with good solutions and proposals together. That is finally happening. And I think the task force was a distraction and it was an interruption. And unfortunately, it took up time of the central administration. They should have been devoting to problem solving with us. And so that process, I hope, is going to be forging ahead.
I'm sorry, you're saying the COVID task force is a distraction?
Yes,
is that right?
It is.
To gather expertise from the community about what schools should look like is a distraction?
No, it's a distraction when it took the central administrator, to the extent that it took us and the central administrators away from our primary task. And that is to keep the stuff on the ground working well, figure out what's working and not working, share it back out, right? And then, of course, have dialogues. We've done that with the Alliance. We've had forums. We've had, so there's a lot of room to open up this process. But I think you'd be surprised to know how willing the educators of the BEU have been to open up these conversations that we have been told. We're not doing it. No, we're not going to respond or come to agreements around those topics.
Yeah. So we're over time, but I'm gonna, Ben and Lauren, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna do one last thing, 1.5 last things. The first is to just once again reiterate my deep gratitude to all of you for engaging in this vitally important conversation, the beginning of a hopefully an ongoing dialogue across this community. We need more of this, and so I cannot tell you how thankful I am from the bottom of my heart. I've been living in Brooklyn for 20 years. I'm in it for the long haul. So, and as I said, I have a 5-year-old who's just getting started. So we're like, people want to solve this. We have a community that wants to solve this. And so these are important steps, and I thank you. And the last thing I want to do is I actually wanted to turn it back briefly to Jason and Wendy as frontline educators, just to give us one last thought sort of about where you are, where you want this district to go, you know, about the kids that ultimately, even though we have a lot of adult conversations about adult issues, this is for children. So I wanted to refocus our attention on what really matters and give you guys both and Bob too. Sorry if I forgot about that, Bob. Just give you guys like a minute, and then I'll hand it back to Ben and Lauren. So Wendy, do you want to start just a quick minute?
Yeah, I mean, my heart and soul is in early childhood education, and I want us to really, you know, commit to bringing BEAT back next year. I think it's vitally important to the community that we maintain this, you know, worldwide renowned program that has taken a beating the last couple of weeks. So I hope that conversations continue to ensure that all the staff are rehired and all the paras get to, you know, come back next year, because it would be a huge loss to the community, and it would break my heart to see BEAP not continue to be the cornerstone of Brookline early education.
Thank you for that, Wendy. Bob?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say that I think that that things are really going as well as could be expected under the circumstances, at least from my experience at Heath, that things are going well. And I think that for the most part, things are, you know, not going the way we would want, and we would want schools back together.
One thing is I can never hear. Oh.
I think that there's huge progress that's been made, and I'm really looking forward to building a strong and functioning relationship with the new administration and the school committee going forward. And I know that working together, we can accomplish great things and get Brookline back where it needs to be.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm looking and hoping and praying that Brookline will invest into the heartbeat, the lifeblood of the town, which are the children. And all of us educators, we're all kid first, and we want to make sure the kids have whatever they need in order to be the best versions of themselves. And whether that's making sure our health and wellness teachers are taken care of, our fine arts teachers are taken care of, maybe developing a vocational program for students who don't want to go to Harvard University, but maybe want to be an electrician someday. Things of that nature, even athletics, maybe funding athletics all the way, where I had a student last year who couldn't graduate from high school because his mom had a financial situation and couldn't afford to pay the $400 or $500 to play a sport. And that's also equally a part of making a student whole. So I'm hoping and praying that the good people of Brookline continue to invest and make even bigger investments into their most precious gift, which are their children.
Well, thank you all again very much. And as I told you at the beginning, we had many more questions than we got to. Same thing as last week. I'm hoping, and I'll leave this up to Ben and Lauren, if we could forward questions both to the school committee and to the BEU to continue getting answers and deepen all of our understanding of where we are. I think that would be terrific. So thank you all, and thank you, Lauren and Ben, for inviting me to do this, and I'll hand it back to you guys.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Magna. Thank you, Jess and Jason and Wendy and Bob, for doing this, and thank you everybody for attending. I really hope that that this was a useful and productive conversation. And as I said in the beginning, you know, we really want to foster communication and understanding across the community. And I think the more that we talk to each other and listen to each other, the better we'll be able to go about the business of confronting the challenges that we face in our schools and in our town and in our nation as a whole. So thank you again to all of you for doing this on a Sunday evening. I wanted to say briefly that you know, one thing that we've done in the Brookline Parents Organization is get involved in elections and town elections, because we've always felt that that elections are very important. They're a way to keep our leaders accountable, and to make sure. And it's funny because, you know, when I started in the BPO, I thought, oh yeah, I want to you know, make some change in the school committee and positive change in our schools. And one thing I realized in doing all this work is that it's not just about what you want to do, but it's about having contested elections and about having to debate ideas in the open and in the public forum. And while I love the 3 school committee candidates that are running uncontested this year for election or re-election to the school committee, I also hope that in future years we'll have more contested elections in school committees so we can really discuss things in the public. But the town election is on Tuesday. It's on June 9th. There are 3 people running for school committee. They're unopposed, but it's Suzanne Fetterspiel running for re-election. Mariah Nobrega and Andy Liu are running for open seats. I know all of them and have had extensive conversations with all of them, and I encourage all of you to reach out to them if you want to talk to them about what's going on in our schools and what you think they should do as school committee members. There is a contested race for the select board, so if you haven't voted yet and you're going to, you know, I encourage you to vote on Tuesday. We have Heather Hamilton, who's an incumbent, running for re-election, John Van Scoyac and Eric Hyatt, and so there are 2 available seats, so you can vote for 2 of those 3. I encourage everybody to do some research, look at their websites, you know, do some research, Google everybody, and, you know, cast your vote on Tuesday, because these things are important to the future of our town. And I'm also going to want to break the news that afterwards, I was just speaking earlier with our state representative, Tommy Vitolo, and he's working with Brookline Interactive Group to have a little post-election party, I think at 8:30 on Brookline Interactive, where all the candidates, winning and losing, can speak a little bit about what, you know, what they were trying to do or what they're going to do now that they're elected. So that's all I have to say, aside from thank you to everybody again, and I will turn it over to Lauren, I think.
One second.
Are you there, Lauren? I think
Yes.
you're unmuted now.
Can everyone see me? Okay, sorry, I've had some technical troubles. I'm doing this from my phone, and I hope everybody can see me and I don't look like a teeny little pinhead that I see. So it was just said a few minutes ago by one of our panelists that we are all in this together. And I think that's something that we have to try to keep in mind. Things can get polarized, debates can get heated, conversations can be difficult. And I think we saw that tonight. There's some difficult conversations, but we are all in this together. This is an unprecedented situation. These are unprecedented times. And one of the things that we've tried to do in the BPO is create a space where conversations that are maybe difficult feel relatively safe. And keep in mind that this is really about the education of our children. It's about the experience of our children, the experience of our educators, and that's the relationship that counts the most. So thank you for attending tonight. Like Ben said, please go out and vote if you are able to vote on June 9th. In addition to a contested select board race and uncontested but exciting school committee election, there are many town meeting member races, and those count too. Town meeting is going to have the final say on the budget, and write your town meeting members if you have strong feelings about how money should be spent. You know, we still have a $500,000 deficit for the schools. Let your town meeting members know how you feel about that. Town meeting has the power of the purse, and that's something you all should remember. Anyway, thank you for attending, and we are hoping to have other conversations in the future, perhaps not as heated or just about issues that are so difficult and sometimes painful right now, but all sorts of conversations. And again, we wish you well. Take care of yourselves and your family, and good night.